The rancher took one look at the two frightened children clinging to her skirts and said, "I ordered a wife, not a ready-made family. Get back on that train." Cast aside and desperate, Catherine found herself on an auction block in a lawless frontier town, her fate in the hands of the highest bidder. When an Apache tracker with scars on his face and secrets in his eyes paid her price, she thought she'd traded one nightmare for another. She had no idea he was about to become her salvation. This is the story of a woman who chose love over safety, a warrior who chose compassion over bitterness, and two orphans who taught them both what family truly means. Now, before we begin this story, relax with a cup of coffee, your baby on your lap, and stay with me to the end and see how love overcomes all obstacles. If you love the story, leave a comment and let me know your favorite part, and let me know what you would like the next story to be about. This is today's story, Bought Wife by the Apache. The rope burned against her wrists. Catherine Brennan stood on the weathered auction platform in the center of Redemption Falls, her heart hammering against her ribs as the desert sun beat down mercilessly. Beside her, 7-year-old Thomas clutched his baby sister Emma so tightly the infant had stopped crying from sheer exhaustion. The boy's eyes were wide with terror, darting between the crowd of rough-looking men and Catherine's face, searching for reassurance she wasn't sure she could give. "Do I hear $20 for the lot?" the auctioneer called, his voice cutting through the dusty air. "Pretty little thing from back east, comes with 2 extra mouths to feed, but she looks strong enough." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Catherine's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she kept her chin high. This couldn't be happening. 6 hours ago, she'd stepped off the train as Miss Catherine Brennan, mail-order bride to Samuel Cooper, ready to start her new life in the Arizona Territory. Now she was chattel, being sold to the highest bidder because she dared to show compassion to 2 orphan children. "Do I hear $20 for the lot?" the auctioneer called, his voice cutting through the dusty air. "Pretty little thing from back east, comes with 2 extra mouths to feed, but she looks strong enough." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Catherine's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she kept her chin high. This couldn't be happening. 6 hours ago, she'd stepped off the train as Miss Catherine Brennan, mail-order bride to Samuel Cooper, ready to start her new life in the Arizona Territory. Now she was chattel, being sold to the highest bidder because she dared to show compassion to 2 orphan children. "Do I hear $20 for the lot? But only for the woman. Send those brats to the mission." "No!" The word tore from her throat before she could stop it. Thomas's grip tightened on her skirt, and Emma began to whimper again. The auctioneer frowned. "Now, miss, you're in no position to be making demands." $15 for all 3. The voice was deep, quiet, but it cut through the commotion like a blade through silk. The crowd parted, and Catherine's breath caught in her throat. He was Apache. There was no mistaking it. From the long black hair that hung past his shoulders to the bronze skin and high cheekbones. He wore white man's clothes, denim pants and a simple cotton shirt, but moved with a fluid grace that spoke of someone equally at home in both worlds. His dark eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her blood run cold. Not cruelty, but an intensity that frightened her more than any of the leering cowboys in the crowd. "Now hold on, Running Wolf," the auctioneer stammered. "You know the rules. We can't just—" "I'm bidding." The Apache man, Running Wolf, stepped closer to the platform. $15 is more than anyone else has offered. The crowd erupted in protests, but Catherine barely heard them over the roaring in her ears. Stories from back east flooded her mind. Tales of Indian savagery, of women taken captive, of unspeakable horrors. She dismissed them as exaggerations during her long train ride west, but now, facing this man whose expression gave nothing away, those stories suddenly felt terrifyingly real. $20! Samuel Cooper's voice rang out from beside the platform. Catherine's erstwhile fiancé stepped forward, his handsome face twisted with spite. "Only for the woman. Like I said before, I'm not taking on someone else's brats." Running Wolf's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 25 for all three. "This is insane!" Cooper exploded. "You can't let an Indian buy a white woman."
$30, Running Wolf said calmly, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a leather pouch and counted out gold coins that glinted in the harsh sunlight. Cash money, more than she was worth to you when you put her up for sale. The crowd fell silent. $30 was a small fortune, enough to feed a family for months. The auctioneer's eyes gleamed with greed. "Sold!" The gavel came down before Cooper could protest further. "To Running Wolf, come collect your purchases." Catherine's legs nearly gave out. Thomas pressed against her side, trembling like a leaf. Running Wolf climbed the platform steps with steady, measured movements. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps only 25 or 26, close to her own age. A thin scar ran along his left cheekbone, and his hands, as he carefully cut the ropes binding her wrists, were calloused but surprisingly gentle. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then follow me. We have a long way to go before dark." "Where are you taking us?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. His dark eyes met hers again, and she thought she saw a flicker of something that might have been amusement. "To my home. You'll be safe there."
Safe. The word should have brought comfort, but as Catherine gathered Thomas and Emma close and followed the Apache man through the hostile crowd, she wondered if she'd just traded one danger for another. The cabin sat nestled in a small canyon about 3 miles outside Redemption Falls, surrounded by scrub brush and towering red rock formations. It was sturdier than Catherine had expected, well built with careful attention to detail. A small vegetable garden grew beside it, and a lean-to stable housed 2 horses that whinnied softly as they approached. Running Wolf hadn't spoken during the walk, leading them along a path that seemed to materialize out of the desert itself. Catherine had kept Thomas close, carrying Emma when the boy's arms grew tired. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. What did this man want with them? Why had he spent such a fortune? "Inside," Running Wolf said, opening the cabin door. "You'll need water. The children look exhausted." Catherine hesitated at the threshold. Once she stepped inside, there would be no going back. But Emma was crying again, and Thomas's face was sunburned and streaked with dust. They had no other choice. The interior was surprisingly homey. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with cooking implements hanging neatly beside it. A sturdy table and chairs occupied the center of the room, and she could see 2 doors leading to what must be bedrooms. Woven blankets and beautiful geometric patterns hung on the walls, and dried herbs scented the air. Running Wolf moved to a water barrel and poured 4 cups, handing them out wordlessly. Catherine watched him warily as she helped Emma drink, but he made no move toward them. Instead, he began pulling food from a storage chest, dried meat, bread, and what looked like preserved fruit. "You must be hungry," he said, still not looking at her directly. "Eat, then we'll talk." Thomas dove for the food, but Catherine held back. "Why did you buy us?" Running Wolf finally met her eyes. "Because I've seen that look before. The desperation, the fear. My mother had that look when the soldiers came to our village." He paused, something dark passing over his features. "I was 6 years old. They killed my father and took us to the reservation. She died there 2 years later. Broke her spirit first, then her body." Catherine's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just understand that I know what it means to be powerless, to watch someone you love be sold like property." He turned back to the food. "No one should endure that, especially not children." "But why take on the burden of 3 strangers? $30 is—" "I work as a scout for the army. I get paid well. Money means nothing if you have no one to share your life with. This cabin is too quiet. Has been for 5 years since my wife died in childbirth. The baby, too." The admission hung in the air between them. Catherine felt her preconceptions begin to crack. This wasn't the savage from the horror stories. This was a man who understood loss, who chose compassion when he could have walked away. "I don't expect anything from you," Running Wolf said, his voice low. "You'll have the back room. I'll sleep out here. You're free to leave whenever you wish. But if you stay, I promise you'll be safe, all 3 of you." Thomas looked up at Catherine, his young face torn between hope and fear. Emma had fallen asleep against her shoulder, tiny fingers clutching Catherine's dress. For the first time since stepping off that train, Catherine felt something other than terror. "What do we call you?" she asked softly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Running Wolf is my Apache name, but the soldiers call me Jacob. Jacob Running Wolf. You can use whichever feels right to you." Catherine took a breath. "I'm Catherine. This is Thomas and Emma. And we'll stay. At least for now."
The first week passed in an uneasy truce. Catherine spent her days caring for the children and learning the rhythms of Jacob's household. He left before dawn each morning to scout for the army patrol, returning at dusk with game or supplies from town. He was unfailingly polite, never raising his voice, never making demands. He taught Thomas how to care for the horses and showed Catherine which plants in the desert could be used for medicine or food. But Catherine couldn't quite shake her fear. She watched him constantly, waiting for the moment when his true intentions would reveal themselves. At night, she wedged the bedroom door closed and slept with Thomas's small knife under her pillow, ready to defend the children if needed. Jacob noticed, of course. She could see it in the way his shoulders tensed when she flinched at sudden movements, in the careful distance he maintained. But he said nothing, just continued his quiet routine of provision and protection. It was Thomas who began to bridge the gap. The boy was fascinated by Jacob's skills, the way he could read tracks in the dust, the silent way he moved through the desert, the stories he told of animals and spirits in the land. One evening, Catherine emerged from the bedroom to find Thomas sitting beside Jacob at the fireplace, listening with rapt attention as the Apache man taught him words in his native language. "Kili," his horse, and "tu" is water. Can you say it? "Tu," Thomas repeated carefully. "Kili." "Good, you learn fast." Jacob glanced up and saw Catherine watching. Something shifted in his expression. "Your brother has a gift for languages." "He's not my brother," Catherine said automatically, then winced at how cold it sounded. "I mean, We're not related by blood, but yes, he's very clever." "Blood doesn't make family," Jacob said quietly. "Choice does. You chose to protect these children when you had nothing. That makes you their family more surely than any shared ancestor." The words struck something deep in Catherine's chest. She'd spent so much time focused on survival that she hadn't stopped to think about what they'd actually become to each other, this unlikely trio bound together by circumstance and need. "Tell her about the coyote, Jacob, the one who stole the moon." Jacob's lips curved in a genuine smile, transforming his usually serious face. "That's a long story for bedtime, but I'll tell you tomorrow if your mother says it's all right." Catherine started to correct him. She wasn't Thomas's mother, but the boy was already nodding eagerly, and the warmth in Jacob's eyes stopped her. Maybe it didn't matter what they called themselves. Maybe Jacob was right about family being a choice. "Tomorrow," she agreed, "but only if you finish your supper first." That night, she didn't wedge the door closed. The trouble came 3 weeks later, just as Catherine was beginning to feel safe. She'd taken Emma into town to buy supplies while Thomas stayed home with Jacob, who was mending a section of the stable roof. The general store was crowded, but the owner had learned to serve her quickly and without comment. Most of the townspeople had accepted her presence at Jacob's cabin, though their acceptance was grudging at best. Samuel Cooper was waiting outside when she emerged. "Catherine," his voice was smooth, but his eyes were cold, "I think it's time we had a conversation." She clutched Emma tighter and tried to step around him. "We have nothing to discuss, Mr. Cooper." His hand shot out, gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. "I paid good money for you. You were supposed to be my wife. Instead, you're living in sin with a savage. Let go of me." "Not until you listen." He pulled her into the alley beside the store, away from curious eyes. "I've been patient, waiting for you to come to your senses, but my patience is wearing thin. You're going to leave that Indian and come with me, tonight." "I won't." Catherine's voice shook, but she held her ground. "And you have no right." "I have every right." Cooper's face flushed red. "You think anyone in this town will defend you? You're an Indian's whore now. You've got no reputation, no protection. If you were smart, you'd take what I'm offering while you still can." Emma began to cry. Catherine tried to pull free, but Cooper's grip tightened. Fear spiked through her, not just for herself, but for the baby in her arms. "The lady asked you to let go." Jacob's voice cut through the alley like winter wind. He stood at the entrance, his body perfectly still, but Catherine recognized the coiled tension in his stance. Thomas peered out from behind him, eyes wide. Cooper sneered. "This doesn't concern you, running wolf. Go back to your hovel." "You're touching my family. That concerns me." Jacob took a step forward. "Let her go. Now." "Your family?" Cooper laughed, but there was an edge of hysteria in it. "She's a white woman. She doesn't belong with you. She belongs wherever she chooses to be. And she's chosen. Accept it and walk away."
For a terrible moment, Catherine thought Cooper would attack. His face twisted with rage, and his free hand moved toward his own weapon. But then he saw something in Jacob's eyes, some promise of violence that made him reconsider. He released Catherine's arm with a shove that sent her stumbling. "This isn't over." "Yes," Jacob said quietly. "It is." Cooper stalked away, and Catherine sagged against the alley wall, Emma wailing against her shoulder. Jacob was there in an instant, his hands gentle as he checked her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "Did he?" "I'm fine. Frightened, but fine." She looked up at him, seeing the concern etched in every line of his face. "Thank you. If you hadn't come—" "Thomas ran to get me as soon as he saw Cooper following you." Jacob's jaw tightened. I should have been more careful. Should have known he wouldn't let this go. It's not your fault. Catherine shifted Emma to her other shoulder, wincing as her arm throbbed where Cooper had gripped it. But I think we might be in danger. He's not the type to accept defeat gracefully. Jacob nodded slowly. Then we'll be prepared. Come, let's go home. The word home sent warmth through Catherine's chest. When had she started thinking of the cabin that way? When had Jacob's presence begun to feel like safety instead of threat? As they walked back through the desert, Thomas between them and Emma growing drowsy in Catherine's arms, she realized something had shifted. She wasn't following Jacob out of fear or necessity anymore. She was choosing to walk beside him. That night, after the children were asleep, Catherine found Jacob sitting outside the cabin, watching the stars wheel overhead. The desert air was cool, and the silence was broken only by the distant cry of a coyote. "May I join you?" she asked softly. He nodded, and she settled onto the bench beside him, careful to leave a respectful distance between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. "I owe you an apology," Catherine finally said. "For what?" "For being afraid of you. For believing the stories I'd heard without knowing you." She twisted her hands in her lap. "You've shown me nothing but kindness, and I repaid it with suspicion. Your fear was justified. You heard stories, and some of them are probably true. There are violent men among my people, just as there are among yours. Samuel Cooper proved that today. But you're not violent. You're the kindest man I've ever known. You bought us when no one else would. You've cared for us without asking for anything in return. You've been patient with my fear and Thomas's questions and Emma's crying. You've been more of a father to those children in 3 weeks than anyone else has been in their entire lives." Jacob was quiet for so long that Catherine worried she'd said too much. But when he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "When my wife died, I thought my chance at family died with her. This cabin was meant to be filled with children's laughter, with the sounds of life. Instead, it was just empty." He met her eyes, and in the moonlight, she could see the vulnerability there. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. You and Thomas and Emma. You've given me purpose again." Catherine's heart stuttered. "Jacob." "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know you were meant to marry Cooper. I know this isn't the life you planned. But I want you to know that you are not a burden. You're a gift." Before she could second-guess herself, Catherine reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. "This is exactly the life I need," she whispered. "I just didn't know it until now." They sat together in the darkness, hands intertwined, and Catherine felt something unfurl in her chest. It wasn't the passionate love of storybooks. It was something deeper, quieter, a sense of belonging, of having finally found the place where she fit. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and unchanging, as the desert wind whispered secrets through the canyon. And for the first time since stepping off that train, Catherine felt truly safe. Cooper made his move 2 days later. Catherine was hanging laundry when Thomas played with Emma in the shade when she heard the horses. 4 riders came up the canyon trail, Cooper in the lead with 3 rough-looking men she recognized from the saloon. "Jacob!" she called, scooping up Emma. "Thomas, inside, now!" Jacob emerged from the stable, his face grim as he took in the situation. He moved to stand between the riders and his family, his hand resting on his knife. "Turn back," he said calmly. "You're not welcome here." Cooper dismounted, his companions following suit. "I'm not here for a social call, Running Wolf. I'm here to collect what's mine. She was never yours. She was promised to me, paid for, and I'm not leaving without her." Catherine's mind raced. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Jacob was skilled, but 4 against 1 were impossible odds. Unless... "Wait," she stepped forward, ignoring Jacob's sharp look of warning. "If I agree to go with you, will you leave Jacob and the children alone?" "Jacob, no!" Jacob started, but she cut him off. "Will you?" she demanded. Cooper's smile was triumphant. "Of course! I have no quarrel with the savage if he gives up what's mine."
Catherine nodded slowly, her mind working. Then let me say goodbye to the children, gather my things, give me 10 minutes. Catherine! Jacob's voice was low, urgent. She met his eyes, willing him to understand. Trust me. Please, just 10 minutes. Cooper shrugged. Fine, 10 minutes. But if you try to run, I won't run. She held his gaze steadily. You have my word. Catherine ushered Thomas and Emma inside, Jacob following close behind. As soon as the door closed, she whirled to face him. Listen carefully, she whispered. There's a trail behind the canyon, the one you showed me last week. It leads to the army fort, right? Jacob nodded slowly, beginning to understand. Thomas, I need you to be very brave. Take Emma and run as fast as you can to that fort. Tell them Samuel Cooper is attacking an Army Scout's home. Tell Running Wolf needs help. Can you do that? The boy's face was pale, but he nodded. What about you? I'm going to keep them busy. She turned to Jacob. And you're going to help me. Understanding dawned in his dark eyes, followed by fierce pride. The rifle is behind the door. I'll create a diversion. When you hear me shout, that's when the children run. Catherine grabbed the rifle, checking that it was loaded the way Jacob had taught her. Her hands shook, but her resolve didn't waver. She'd come west to find a new life. She'd be damned if she let Cooper destroy the one she'd found. Be careful, Jacob said softly, his hand brushing her cheek. I can't lose you. You won't. She stood on her toes and kissed him, quick and fierce and full of promise. We're family. We protect each other. Jacob touched his forehead to hers for just a moment, then straightened. Stay behind the window. Don't show yourself unless you have to. He opened the door and stepped out, his body language deceptively casual. She needs more time. The children are upset. Time's up, Cooper snapped. Tell her to get out here or we're coming in. I don't think so. Jacob's voice hardened. You want her, you'll have to go through me first. The change in the situation was immediate. Cooper's men spread out, hands on their weapons. Catherine positioned herself at the window, rifle ready, tracking their movements. Behind her, she heard Thomas whisper a prayer as he gathered Emma in his arms. Last chance, Running Wolf. Stand aside. No. The first shot rang out. Catherine fired through the window, aiming high, warning shots meant to scatter, not kill. Jacob dove behind a water trough, and suddenly the peaceful canyon erupted into chaos. Cooper's men returned fire, bullets thudding into the cabin walls. Now, Jacob shouted, "Run!" Catherine heard the back door slam as Thomas fled with Emma. She kept firing, making every shot count, keeping the men pinned down. Jacob had drawn his own rifle and was providing covering fire from behind the trough. One of Cooper's men broke away, heading for the side of the cabin. Catherine's heart lurched. He must have seen the children. She aimed carefully and fired, hitting the ground inches from his feet. He stumbled back with a curse. "The army fort!" she shouted, partly as a warning, partly as hope. "The patrol will hear this. They'll come." "Then we better finish this quick," Cooper yelled back. He stood, gun raised toward Jacob. The bugle call split the air like salvation. Over the ridge came a dozen cavalry soldiers, led by a granite-faced captain. They poured into the canyon, surrounding Cooper and his men before any of them could move. "Drop your weapons," the captain ordered. "Now!" Cooper's gun fell from nerveless fingers. His men followed suit, their faces ashen. Jacob stood slowly, rifle still ready. Catherine emerged from the cabin, shaking with relief. The captain dismounted and strode toward them, his expression thunderous. "Running Wolf, care to explain why I'm getting reports of an armed assault on an Army scout?" "Ask them, Captain Harrison," Jacob gestured toward Cooper and his men. "They attacked my home, threatened my family." Harrison's eyes swept over the scene, the bullet holes in the cabin, the frightened woman with a rifle, and the obvious aggression from Cooper's group. His jaw tightened. "Gentlemen, you're under arrest for assault on a federal employee and his property." He nodded to his men, who began rounding up the prisoners. Then he turned back to Jacob. "Are the children safe?" "They went to the fort for help," Catherine said, her voice cracking. "A 7-year-old boy and a baby. We passed them on the trail," Harrison assured her. "Sergeant Davies is bringing them back now. Brave boy, that one. Told us exactly what was happening." Catherine's knees went weak. Jacob was there in an instant, his arm around her waist, supporting her. She leaned into his strength, no longer afraid to accept it. "Thank you, Captain," Jacob said quietly, "if you hadn't come. Your lady's quick thinking saved you both." Harrison's stern expression softened slightly. "And I'm glad she did. You're one of my best scouts, Running Wolf. Hate to lose you to a coward like this." He jerked his head toward Cooper, who was being dragged away in chains. Cooper's eyes burned with hatred as he passed. "This isn't over, you hear me? A white woman living with an Indian? It's not natural. It's not—" "It's none of your business," Harrison cut him off coldly. "What a man does in his own home, with his own family, is his concern alone. Not yours, not mine." He tipped his hat to Catherine. "Ma'am, I hope this is the last trouble you see from this lot." "Thank you, Captain." As the soldiers led the prisoners away, Catherine heard hoofbeats and turned to see Thomas racing toward them on the back of a cavalry horse, Emma clutched in his arms. The boy was grinning from ear to ear, despite the tear tracks on his face. "Catherine! Jacob! We did it! We got help!" Jacob caught the horse's reins, then lifted both children down. Thomas threw himself at Jacob, who caught him in a fierce embrace. Emma reached for Catherine, babbling happily, oblivious to the danger she'd been in. "You were so brave, Thomas," Jacob told him, his voice rough with emotion. "Both of you, so brave." "We're a family," Thomas said simply, as if that explained everything. "Families protect each other. You said so." Catherine looked at the three of them, her found family, her chosen family, and felt tears spill down her cheeks. Jacob reached out, pulling her into their embrace, and suddenly they were all holding each other in the dusty canyon while the sun beat down and the desert wind sang its ancient song. "Yes," she whispered, "we're a family."
The seasons turned, and the cabin in the canyon filled with life. Catherine married Jacob in a quiet ceremony, with Captain Harrison serving as witness, and Thomas proudly standing as Jacob's best man. Emma took her first steps on the packed earth floor, giggling as she toddled between her mother and father. Thomas learned to track and hunt, soaking up Jacob's teachings like desert earth soaking up rain. Catherine learned, too, not just the skills of surviving in the harsh landscape, but the stories of Jacob's people, the language, the traditions. She taught Jacob to read and write in English, and together they would sit by the fire at night, Thomas between them and Emma asleep in her crib, reading from the few precious books Catherine had brought from the East. The townspeople of Redemption Falls gradually accepted them, though some never would. It didn't matter. They had each other, and that was enough. On summer evenings, when the heat finally broke and the stars began to emerge, the four of them would sit outside the cabin. Jacob would tell stories of coyote and raven, of how the world came to be, while Catherine held Emma in her lap and Thomas leaned against her shoulder. Sometimes Catherine would share tales from her own childhood back east, and they would laugh at the differences between their worlds. But mostly, they simply sat together in comfortable silence, watching the desert paint itself in shades of gold and crimson as the sun set. Four people who had been strangers, brought together by chance and hardship, who had chosen to become something more. 2 years after that fateful day on the auction block, Catherine stood in the doorway of the cabin, watching Jacob teach Thomas how to gentle a new colt. Emma played at her feet, building elaborate structures from rocks and sticks. Inside, Catherine could feel the flutter of new life, another child due before winter. When she told Jacob last night, he had wept with joy. She thought about the woman she'd been when she stepped off that train, frightened, desperate, with no idea what her future held. That woman would never have imagined this life, would never have believed that her greatest fortune would come not from the man who'd paid for her passage, but from the man who'd paid $30 to set her free. Thomas caught him watching and waved, his smile bright as summer sun. Jacob looked up too, and his eyes met hers across the distance, dark and warm and full of love. Emma tugged on her skirt, demanding attention. Catherine smiled and waved back, her heart full to bursting. She had come west looking for a new life. What she'd found was so much more. She'd found home.
Howdy, this is Donna, the behind-the-scenes writer and director of Lonesome Longhorn Romance Tales. If Catherine and Jacob's story of unexpected family and frontier justice moved you, please let me know in the comments. Which moment touched your heart the most? What frontier tale should I bring you next? Would you love to hear the story of a saloon girl seeking redemption who becomes a preacher's unlikely bride? A Pinkerton detective tracking a criminal who falls for the outlaw's innocent sister? A mail-order bride who discovers her rancher is actually a Native American chief seeking peace between two worlds? Or a woman fleeing an abusive marriage who finds refuge with a reclusive mountain man and his half-wild daughter? Comment below with your choice or suggest your own story idea. The story with the most comments in a week will be my next story. Your enthusiasm fuels these tales. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next journey into the heart of the American frontier.